Hello, so this is going to be a shorter and less technical episode than usual. I just got back from RootsTech in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is probably the industry's largest convention for technology related to genetic genealogy or genealogy in general. And that's held yearly, and this year there's going to be two. There's going to be a second one in London, which I'll also be attending. But I'm back, and so is my luggage, which took about 4 hours extra to come back because it missed the plane from Philadelphia to Washington. But I'm back, and so is all my stuff now. So I had some expectations going into this. Was my first RootsTech, and those expectations were far exceeded and maybe blown out of the water. As an admin of this group, if you're watching in the Borland genetics group, or as a co-admin in the DNA software programming group, or just as a contributing member in some of the other Facebook groups or wherever this may be shared, I see it as my duty as a group's administrator to sort of be an ambassador and relay back some of the insights and the information I learned at the convention and how it might relate to or help any people within the group. So this is my attempt at doing that, and not everything's going to apply to every group, obviously. I'm in a lot of groups, and my niche is obviously DNA reconstruction, and I'll try to keep it short and at the main idea level, as many of the groups that I'm in have nothing to do with DNA reconstruction. So I'll obviously be focused on that aspect to some extent, but while I'm looking at what I learned through the prism of DNA reconstruction, the theme of the convention really has been one of collaboration and connection, and that applies both collaboration and connection within the subfields and areas of interest within the industry, whether it be paper research or DNA research or making charts, graphical representations, or ways to share your genealogy with others. And it also relates to the relatives that you're working with to work on your family history and collaborating with to create that family history. And I really feel like it was an excellent convention. I'm glad I attended. And if they're all like this, I'll be at every one of them. So day one of the convention, I attacked like a convention newbie. I want to be at every class, absorbing all the information about all the topics I was interested in, and getting the best bang for my buck, because it's expensive to travel halfway across the country or across the continent in the case here for a convention or a trade show. And I'm ultimately marketing or promoting a free product, so it's not like I'm going to get much return on my investment in this, other than maybe in the long game. And so I'd selected, before I left home, a lot of the classes that I wanted to attend, and I reserved some time for the expo hall and allotted some time, free-form time, for the evenings to have some activities with my. I have a cousin that lives in Utah, and with other people that I had planned to meet up with. So what did I actually do on Wednesday, day one? Well, I slept through the early bird session because and I planned to, but I was kind of hoping that maybe I'd attend, but that was absolutely impossible because I got to my hotel at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and it turned out they had overbooked, even though I booked the hotel in January. They apparently gave away my room, so I ended up walking across half the town, well, no, 3 blocks, with my bags to the Quality Inn, and they had a place for me there. So, but I was extremely exhausted in the morning. But I still managed to attend a ton of the sessions the first day, all except that early bird session, and attended the discussions. So, the content and the quality of the presentations was excellent, in my opinion. The first one was the first one I went to on that, I guess it was Wednesday, was a class on presenting your family history via storytelling and it was given by a panel of 3 presenters. One of the 3 speakers, the one that captured my imagination the most, was Charlene Reyes, and she talked about her grandfather from the Philippines, and she really, through her words, brought her ancestor to life. You know, I don't know anything about her family, but it sounded like a really cool family story, and she caught my attention. And in addition to that, she was an expert in like artificial intelligence as far as training with respect to photographs and things like that. And she was working on things like how to train a computer to recognize whether a family photo is interesting, or what, you know, if you get a box of family photos, which one should be put on your wall and stuff. And I thought that was kind of neat, because I'm also into photography, and this was really innovative to me. I'd never heard of anything like this, where you might use technology to figure out how interesting a family photo might be, or how relevant it might be to your family story when you're putting together a collage or video or something like that. So I thought that was really interesting. Later that morning, I attended the Ask an Ancestry Professor, and that was the name of the presentation or seminar, and that was with Barry Starr from Ancestry.com. And this was a pre-rollout of the new tools that they came out with, the through lines and the colored circles or stars. Or I haven't had too much time to play with it, and I confess that by accident my Ancestry subscription actually ran out this weekend, and I'm going to fix that tonight. But so I haven't had much time to play with these, or any time, to be honest. But I've seen it on a lot of screens. I've seen presentations about it, and his discussion was really good. I thought he did an excellent job with his presentation of explaining things like the ethnicity, how ethnicity is calculated. He discussed everything from the basics of DNA inheritance and some of the same types of diagrams that I had in my charts about, like visual phasing and stuff. He had similar diagrams in there, and he really did a good job of bringing that kind of information to the public. He talked about how Ancestry is using the network analysis to do genetic communities and stuff, and I'm sure I went over ahead of a lot of people there, but I think he explained it very well, and I'm hoping there's a link to this so that I can, in some of the Facebook groups, whatever, when I get a question about, you know, or rather I get a comment that, you know, ethnicity is all made up, and there's nothing to it, it's just for entertainment. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but I think this lecture really, really well explain both the limitations and the value of the ethnicity tools. Perhaps more importantly, he explained the why, which enables an Ancestry customer to evaluate, to some extent, the validity on their own. So instead of just a conversation of in a Facebook group about, no, it's for entertainment, or no, these are just percents, you know, or no, that's just noise. He actually gave a detailed, and I thought a very good explanation of why you should or shouldn't trust your ethnicity results, and what kind of science they're using. And it's not just for entertainment; it is science. And at the same time, it's not black and white. I mean, there's no just because something's science doesn't mean there's only one conclusion you could draw from the or one inference that you can draw from the valid scientific results, or you can interpret things in different ways. And he explained how Ancestry does it, and I thought he did it quite well. Starr was, of course, Barry Starr has also posed a question, as expected, as to any news on chromosome browser, and I feel that's the Achilles heel of Ancestry, not having the essential feature that all their competitors have, especially since I think genetic genealogy is pushing towards the direction of segmentology and reconstruction. And I have to say, I wasn't all that impressed with the way he handled the question. Actually, I was at the time, because I didn't know what Ancestry was about to roll out. So he essentially said that those with this question are going to be really happy tomorrow when Ancestry rolls out, you know, their new features. And I was optimistic at that time, although, you know, with some hesitation. But after seeing the tools, which I think are useful and welcomed, they have absolutely nothing to do with segmentology or releasing that data that we want from Ancestry, and except maybe on the back end. I mean, they may use some of that data to calculate the things in this tool, but no, they have not brought segmentology or allowed positional data to the customer. And I think that's a shame, and I also think that was a bit disingenuous to answer the question that way, to be honest. So, and don't get me wrong, I love Ancestry. I respect Barry Starr also, and I think that he dodged the question. And it's an issue where Ancestry really needs to be called out, and they really need to answer. They need some consumer pressure to put their feet to the fire, because at this point there's really no excuse for not providing positional data to their customers. And if they think that the customers aren't interested in it, or because I've heard a lot of excuses, or that most of our customers test for ethnicity. So what? I mean, if 14 million customers you have, and 1 million of them want to know their segment data, and 13 million test for that purpose, why exclude the 1 million that want their segment data? Or that would if you explained what it meant to them. And that's part of the role of the third-party tool maker, or the third-party non-industry player in this industry, is to explain to the customers or to the consumers why they want this stuff, why it's their benefit. And I'll get more into that a little bit later in a minute. But anyway, the presentation was excellent. That was the one down point of it, and it wasn't a flaw to the presentation. That was actually a question that was asked after it, and I didn't like the way it was handled, and I didn't like the way Ancestry rolled out the new tools without the new tool I wanted. So take it as you will, but the presentation itself by Barry Starr I thought was excellent, and I wish they would make more presentations like this. And I also hope that they make a similar presentation that's free, so that when people ask in the Facebook groups, how does this work, or what, or start whining about, this is just for entertainment value, that I can point a link to this, and they can understand, well, yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not entertainment. This is science. Okay, so for lunch, I had lunch with members of the Lithuanian Facebook group on Wednesday, and that was nice to connect with some other Lithuanian researchers that are equally up to their necks in it, if not more. Also, the two individuals I had lunch with are involved in the industry, and I think we found some potential areas for collaboration, and at a minimum, made some personal connections as fellow Lithuanian-American researchers, and I look forward to working with them in the future and meeting with them again. My largest ethnicity is Lithuanian. I'm a lot of things, but I'm Lithuanian-American, and I'm also part Norwegian, and I attended a lecture on Norwegian paper research, and it was fascinating. That was on Wednesday afternoon, and it was fascinating and informative, and the guy who taught it was an absolute expert. I mean, he knew the ins and outs of every single database and what's available and what's not, and what types of information you'll find, and he puts on some screens some gems, and it's in Norwegian, but things about prison records where it described somebody's child being taken away from their mother because the mother was lazy and whatever. But just not that that's a good thing to do, but the description of like the mother. I mean, this isn't just she was born on whatever day. And it described things about her character, things about her that you don't find in the typical genealogy record. So from a records point of view, there are some really cool records out there in Norwegian records that are unusual sources, like prison records and whatnot. And they don't just have things like the date they were admitted, or whatever. They have discussions on whether or not they should be released and things like that based on their character. And that really good. You can learn a lot about your ancestor that way. So I was kind of impressed by that. And I don't know of any other type of record that I've seen that really has that. So that was kind of cool. All right, so let's see, go back to my notes here. Oh yeah, so from the technology side, because that's my niche, right? As far as Norwegian goes, they've got a lot of records online. In fact, they've got an immense amount of records online, and a lot of it's through the government, and they have these big databases. And they've also had this new thing called the person register, and I know that's not how you say it in Norwegian, but that's how it's kind of spelled, of Norway. And it links records from individuals from the different websites, and I'm thinking that from the different databases, and I'm thinking that this is a perfect opportunity for artificial intelligence and linking records. If that's not what they may already be doing that, but for linking individuals across databases, I'm thinking genetic networks would be great for that, and in the same way that newspaper articles can be linked that way. But if you've got like discussions on histories of farms and things like that, and they're all in databases, to be able to link the people and the places named in those records, especially if they're detailed records, by a genetic network or by network, and be able to examine those clusters and see what they have in common, I think, or to group the evidence or the records by what they have in common. I think that may be extremely valuable to researchers, especially in countries where surnames aren't really that prevalent until recently. So what do you do when your ancestor is Per Johnson and there or Lars Lars Erickson, and that's like, so are half the population of that country, well, the networks, if you can link the records, if you can figure out what groups of records are related to one another, instead of relying on those names and surnames, you rely on the relationships depicted in the records, and they're all linked. I think there's a really great opportunity there in Scandinavian research, and that's a tech side. It's not my tech side. I do DNA, but that's an example of the light bulb going off in my head while I'm watching some of these lectures, because there's a lot. I got to see a lot of what needs to be done, what customers want, what's being done, and my light bulb in my head is constantly going off. And well, how can I contribute to that? And so in that way, this convention was really excellent. So yeah, I mean. And another thing he said was, someone asked a question of, well, are these available in English? And he's like, no, they're in Norwegian. I don't know, maybe if there's a market someday, if somebody's going to pay me to translate them to English, I'd gladly do it. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I'd rather spend that effort doing what I'm doing, which is a ton of work on the Norwegian side, right? And I thought that was a great question, and I don't think he should have to. I think that's something that technology should be doing for him, and I think that's going to be doing it for him in the very near future. Then I attended a presentation by Drew Smith, who I've had a lot of interactions with over the past year or so over the GEDmatch Facebook group. In fact, this is a secret that I've been trying to hide, but I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to tell you here. When I first joined the GEDmatch group, I had done some Excel spreadsheets on how to manipulate raw data files and things like that, but I didn't quite understand how the biology worked. And he was like, took me aside and was like, "Hey, Kevin, it's not that we have a double helix; there's 2 copies of every chromosome." And I'm like, "Really?" And because I hadn't had biology since like freshman year of high school, but I'm a math guy, I'm a physics major. So I was easily able to come up with algorithms and formulas to replicate the things you need to do for DNA reconstruction, but I didn't really understand the science at that point, and that was years ago. But thank you, Drew, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to attend your discussion, because you were important in my early years of understanding DNA, and you still are relevant, and your discussion was excellent. So the discussion that I listened in on by Drew was one on the fan club for ancestors, and how to get around your brick wall by not just looking at the family members, but take a look at the witnesses on records, take a look at the baptismal sponsors, take a look at the people that are mentioned in the same newspaper articles with, and he really did a great job of explaining how to do that, why you do that, and promoting the results of what happens when you do that. And I also think he left open a little opportunity for, I think that's another opportunity I think that data scientists have for doing these kind of network type of things. I don't see why we're doing network clusters and stuff with shared matches, shared segments, and we're not doing it with baptismal records. I mean, why not do the same type of clustering type of things using baptisms from a baptism book from Harrison County, Ohio, from from the German church or whatever, and seeing which participants in the church cluster and seeing which ones are likely families, even though they have different surnames and whatnot. I think again, my light bulb turned on. It was turned on. It was on steady for most of his talk. It was a very good discussion. So basically, I absorbed a ton of information. I tried to take good notes, and I had some new ideas on how to apply things I learned to my work. And I need some time to fully process it because this is really an intense week. That's just one day so far. I hope to spend a lot of time this month reflecting on what I learned and integrating these new ideas into my work in the DNA reconstruction field. Next day, I attended Blaine Bettinger's session on clustering and genetic networks, which is actually what I'd been thinking about after watching those other the last two lectures that I attended. And I've been a big fan of Blaine since, and I was excited to attend his presentation and actually to meet him in person. And I was not disappointed. My brain light bulb was on at least a dozen times during his speech, and a lot of the times my stream of consciousness had me thinking about how I can use my skills to automate some of the types of data networks that he discussed, because the topic of his discussion was also about data networks. And I plan to do so soon if others don't beat me to it. I mean, I think Blaine had a lot of really, really good ideas, and ones that I may be in a unique position to tackle. But I'm sure others are also. So that was my morning of day 2 on Thursday, and I was so exhausted after day 1 that I decided I had to change my approach. So I did things like eating, and because day 1 I don't even think I ate except for no, I had dinner with my cousin Sherry that I hadn't ever met before in person, so that was nice. But during the day I don't think I had any lunch or breakfast or anything like that. It was just about getting to the next session and just taking everything in, which is great, but you can't do that for a whole week. You got to eat. I had my hair cut, things like that. You got to also make some time for yourself if you're going to one of these conventions. Shave my beard a little bit anyway. So I spent about 2 hours in the expo hall as opposed to going to the structured. I feel like I missed out because the lectures that I'd been to were excellent, and I missed some because I went to the expo hall instead, but wandered around. But I mean, I didn't miss anything. The wandering about the expo hall was just about absorbing creative ideas from vendors and from individuals, entrepreneurs, ranging from beautiful family charts to making. Some guy was writing mystery books about being a genealogist and about solving weird things like that, and really cool things. And then on the tech end too, and I found a lot of inspiration from some of the new tech products, even if they didn't have anything to do with DNA per se. I'm thinking about, wow, well, that could be a cool interface for my family tree portion of my tools or something like that. And I met people that I want to work with, I think, in the future, or that I may want to license stuff from when I come out with a commercial product. I discovered a product, and I'm going to give some shout outs here to a couple that I thought were exceptional. I discovered a product that deals with 4D geotagging. So geotagging is like putting a place on a picture or on a chromosome is what I want to put it on. And putting a tag as to a place, and they do it as far as time too. So that's kind of neat. So you can go through their sort of Google map of place and time based on the geotag coordinates that you put in, the 4D geotag coordinates. And I thought that might be useful to my line of products. I also met with Rob Worthen that I had met before, and he's got a project, and him and John Collins, and fellow like-minded third-party tool makers, and we exchanged ideas. Their product is DNA JET compliant, and which is one of the leading third-party tools in the industry. And it was nice to talk to them and exchange ideas and think about how we can perhaps collaborate and bring better things to the consumers, putting all our heads together in the future, because I think they've got an excellent product. Another particular vendor of interest was To the Letter DNA, and they're making headlines this year with their artifact extraction, where they're taking DNA from things like stamps or the seals on envelopes and stuff like that, and that is really awesome. And we have a lot of shared interests, obviously, since I'm doing DNA reconstruction, and they're also doing DNA of people that are no longer with us. So everything from the ethical concerns, right? And I don't think there are any real genuine ethical concerns as far as that goes. I think the value of that far outweighs any potential issues there. But that's my opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion on that, and I'm a pretty public guy to begin with, so take that as you may. But I saw opportunities for synergistic collaboration in the very near future. I'm really impressed with what they're doing, and I actually at RootsTech, as part of our talks with them, I made my software. I released an update to make my software compatible with their kits, since I was given a sample of their data to work with, and the results I got just from comparing it to some people in my own family to check to see resolution and quality. It was one data point, but it was really good. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm hoping to do some more work with them in the future. I hope this is just the beginning, because I see opportunity for a lot of collaboration, both in terms of technology and our shared interests, and in things like continued acceptance of reconstructed or synthetic kits and the big databases that allow uploads. And we've got a lot in common. We've got a lot of common interests, and we're on the same page. We're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to bring back the past in these reconstructions. Them through artifacts and me mathematically, but we're on the same page there, so that's good. Thursday afternoon, Krista Cohen announced that she's from Ancestry. She's the barefoot genealogist, is what I know her as. She announced and explained the new features in Ancestry, and I went over that a bit with the Barry Starr thing, and I don't want to make it sound like these things are terrible and we wanted a chromosome browser. I mean, there's some truth to that, but it's the second part of it, but they're not terrible. I thought the tools that they did announce were actually quite good, especially the colored stars or circles that everybody's been asking for years. I don't know why it took Ancestry years to actually listen to their customers, and I hope maybe they'll come around with the chromosome browser. But all in all, I think the new updates are pretty good. The through lines is interesting. I mean, I kind of like the user interface of it, but in terms of like new functionality, it's not really much. That doesn't mean it's bad. I like the user interface, and I think it's an improvement, but it's like if you took your shared ancestor hints and your DNA circles and your proposed new ancestor hints and like packed them tight and made a snowball out of them and threw them into a wall, you'd get through lines, and except it's got a nicer interface. And I liked all those things before, and I still like it, and but it's nothing shockingly new. Again, the colored stars or circles, or I haven't had the chance to fully play with it, because like I said, my subscription expired this weekend without me knowing. So I'm going to do that maybe tonight. But it looks a lot like what Blaine had already done, and because he came out with this tool earlier this year that did the same thing, because I mean, he's paying attention to what customers want, and he filled in the gap that Ancestry wasn't filling. And so kudos to Blaine. I mean, I'm sorry that they kind of made your tool a little obsolete, because they did what you had, you fulfilled the demand before they did. But yeah, thanks for doing that, because I don't think they would have paid attention unless you had made it blatant that people want this, and that they should be providing that kind of service. And so kudos to Blaine. Okay, and also to people like Jason Lee that champion this, because I know he's got like, what, 50,000 people in his group, and he's like, day after day, we need need colored stars, we need chromosome browsers, and thanks, Jason, because you're like on the front lines of getting Ancestry to do what we want to. And don't get me wrong, I love Ancestry, but sometimes they could be slow to responding to customers' customer needs or wants, asks. That's the word, asks. Okay, so Friday, I decided to focus mostly on business and the business end of promoting my software and my business agenda. And I think I made some great strides for my department. I'm not going to get into too much details. And I'm thankful and I'm honored that the big minds and big names in the industry that I've been doing this. I've just started in this, and I released my project at Halloween in October 2018, and I'm glad you guys accepted me as as your peer. I'm really honored by that, and I think there's so much room for collaboration, and I looked up to you guys. I still do, and we're going to work great together, making new products for the community, for the genetic genealogy community, and for consumers. This is not going to be a one-time event for me. I'm here to stay, and I'm proud to be welcomed and accepted by the movers and shakers of the industry that I look up to. So thanks for treating me as your own. I guess that's a message to all those that I interacted with in the industry, because I felt I was treated very well as a newbie. There was no initiation. I wasn't beaten in. I was welcomed in with open arms, and I appreciate that. On Friday, I attended one session because I made it mostly focused on business. I had some meetings and things I had to attend, but I did attend an incredible session on genealogy resources relating to fraternal organizations, like the Masons, for example. And I'm a member of a fraternal organization, but that has no bearing on my genealogy resource. Maybe for my descendants it will, if I ever have any descendants. But like my great-grandfather was a Mason, and I learned some interesting things. I didn't realize there were auxiliary. I didn't know. I heard the names of some of them when I heard them. I didn't know what they were. There are auxiliary groups for women organizations that are the same type of fraternal organizations, and that records exist, and he showed where to get those records and what kind of records you might find. And again, like I said, with some of the Norwegian records that were kind of colorful, that explained a little more about people's lives. Some of these Freemason records and things like that have information that go beyond when a person's born or died, and actually have some interesting information about them in their lives and their businesses and things like that. So that's something I'm going to pursue. I hope I can find some of that in my own family. Doesn't have much to do with technology, other than the fact that it's being gathered in databases. Some of them are, but some of them are scattered out in lodges throughout the country. So if you're in the U.S., something to look into. If you're not sure, if you think maybe one of your great grandfathers was a Mason or something like that, there are records. Look for them. It's worth pursuing. There's some interesting records, not just names and dates. It's not going to apply to every ancestor. It's not going to apply to every Masonic lodge, but there are some gems that he showed on the screen, and I hope I find some of that in my family. I also made sure to be in attendance and support Johnny Pearl as he presented on the Rockstar stage in the Ruby Room. He must have had several thousand attendees for his lecture on I guess that was Friday, and he did very well. I was walking through as I left, and I heard people talking about how well he presented the material, and about how straightforward it was presented, and how they understood everything. And he's been an incredible supporter of my own work, and he's the guy from DNA Painter, which I'm assuming you all know. Certainly everyone in my group does, because I recommend that product to everybody. But over the past months, he's been extremely supportive to me as I've been starting out, and I really appreciate it. And I think his DNA Painter product is top notch, and obviously the entire industry does, which is why he was put on the Rockstar stage for this convention. And it's essential for genetic genealogy. There's no way around it. So I'm sure we'll continue to interact and perhaps collaborate in the future, enhance our shared customers' experiences with our tools. And at the heart of visual phasing, which is like essential for my tools, you need some sort of interactive visual representation of the segment data, and there is no better tool for that right now, and possibly ever, well, than the DNA Painter. So use it, get it. And it's also got what's neat about it, and what sets it apart from some of the other visualization tools, is that it's intuitive, and it's you can put other types of, you can misuse it. You know, you could use my tools with it, which may not be using it for its intended purposes, but it's a great way to graphically represent stuff in your chromosomes, even if it's not what it was intended for. It's versatile, and it provides back end. You know, it's the back end access of my tools for visual phasing, and I intend to keep it that way. I really like the product. Okay, so I stayed up until the wee hours of the morning Friday night developing the necessary code for a software update. So I did have my own software update for RootsTech, and one of the things that I had was making it compatible with the 2019 family tree DNA kits, which are different in format and their output, but now my program could read them. And the to the letter output, which is that's the one with the stamps and the artifacts and the envelopes and things like that. So now my tool can take those kind of DNA kits and treat them just like the others. So if you've got any of those, Borland Genetics is certainly something you might want to look at if you have 3 to 10 to 20 kits of raw data available to you. But I missed the 8 o'clock session because I was up until 5 o'clock in the morning making the update to my software. So I missed Johnny Pearl's morning presentation that he did with Blaine and with Angie Bush. And I would have liked to have gone that, and I kind of regret that I didn't. So I'm hoping it's available online, because I will pay to see that. I'll surely watch it at my leisure, maybe this week if it does become available. I did, however, catch Johnny's subsequent presentation, which was my last presentation that I attended for the week on Saturday. So I marked the end of my trip with a commitment to help the Mito and Y-DNA people with their not-for-profit endeavors, and I'm excited to provide any scientific or legal assistance they may need, because when I'm not being a scientist, I'm a lawyer. But don't take anything I say in my group to be legal advice unless I specifically engage me as your lawyer. I'm acting as a scientist, not a lawyer, when I discuss DNA in general conversation here. But I'm excited to work with some of them, and it's got some of the people, the top tool makers in the industry that I'm going to be working with, and we're going to try to bring this Mito and DNA thing out to the public and do it right. So as a member of what I guess I would consider the short list of independent DNA innovators and third-party tool producers, I want to relate to the people in my groups that my business interests may put me in competition to some extent with the other people doing the same sort of thing. But to a large extent, our products are symbiotic. That it helps people to have a copy of my tools and a copy of Johnny's DNA painter, and a copy of or not a copy of, but to have access to Genetic Affairs or whatever, and to DNA GEDCOMP client, because they're all different tools. And there's only so much money that goes around for people to pay for these tools, but there's minimal overlap. I mean, we're really filling different voids in the industry based on our specialties, our personal background, and the kind of tools that we have the ability to create. So buy them all. But I support the other tool makers too, because there's some competition, but this is really friendly competition, because we're symbiotic here. I mean, you need DNA Painter really to be successful using my tools. You need GEDmatch. GEDmatch, I send people over to GEDmatch and they pay for the subscriptions over there, because if they don't, they're not going to be able to use my tools properly. And I appreciate the donations that I've had in my tools, because that keeps me programming for But on a personal note, getting into that, the only thing about the convention that bummed me out a little bit was, besides the $5 Diet Cokes for there was a presentation about DNA tools in which the field of reconstruction was really dismissed as not being useful for genealogy purposes. And I obviously vehemently disagree with that, and I imagine most of you do as well. In all fairness, the statement was made with respect to the Lazarus tool on GEDmatch, but I also vehemently disagree with that. I think that's an extremely valuable tool. And again, even though they're my competitor, they've got a state-of-the-art tool out there. I think the speaker didn't really have enough scientific understanding of how these tools work and how reconstruction works, as was evidenced by the fact that she said that in order to use the Lazarus tool, you need 3 siblings, and that's just flat out wrong. That's referring to visual phasing, and not only that, you don't need 3 siblings for visual phasing anymore too. That's outdated information. So, but not every expert or every person that's speaking in the field, I mean, it's tough to keep head in this business has a chance to keep updated on every single aspect of the industry. So I don't blame her at all for saying those things. However, rather I see it as a shortcoming in what I've done, as far as it's my job to promote the field and to explain to educate the consumer of why DNA reconstruction is important and why it's valuable. And I have not done that yet, although I intend to be making my major debut in London as far as presenting and things like that. So we'll see. Yeah, so I've registered to present at London, and my application is still being under consideration. They've only announced like 12 of the speakers out of the 100 something so far. They've announced pretty much the ones that they've asked to speak. So if I don't make the short list, then I'm sure I will at some of the other seminars to come up, and if not, I will make my presence known otherwise. I've already talked to other people about doing a booth and things like that. So we're going to be having a booth in London, regardless of whether I'm a speaker. Where there's going to be a big Borland Genetics presence there. So I intend to, if I'm chosen as speaker there, inform the public about DNA reconstruction and about in a balanced way. Because don't get me wrong, I mean, it's not the answer to every solution. It's to every genealogy problem. It's the answer to only very few of them. But it's an outside the box solution to some really potential way to get around brick walls. I've solved many a family situation using this technique. So it's not the only technique. It's not always the right technique, but it's something that's there, and it's also a pretty cool technique because it's a way of preserving the DNA record of your ancestors. I mean, so you could say, well, it's not going to get you new matches. Well, I mean, yeah, it will. It'll get you a new matches of all the intermediate reconstructions. You can see how much DNA you inherited from your great-grandfather, and although it's going to be the same matches on those segments that you have, that's more information, right? And it's also more information than the filter, because you could use your part of your whatever you inherited from your great-grandfather, say, and whatever your cousin did, and add them together. And that's what my toolkits do, and create this mega kit for your great-grandfather that's going to have lots of matches, and they're going to be more than the sum of its parts. And especially for situations like endogamy, where you want to see if is it real. I mean, if you only got like one segment from one or two segments from, let's say, your Jewish ancestor or something like that, and are any of the people on that actually cousins, or is it all just a result of the founder effect? Well, when you have 2 segments, it's really hard to tell. 30, because you've used my tools and aggregated your resources, and you can see how you relate to certain people versus just just Jewish people in general. That's an answer. So yes, it has value. No, it may not have more matches necessarily. If you're just looking at 2 people and you're going to combine their kits, let's say a mother and a child, and you're going to create a kit for the mother's parents, you get the same matches the mother had, but it's going to organize them, and it's going to it's going to put them together in a way that you can rack and stack them to create deeper, to drill deeper and create reconstructions for deeper ancestors when you collaborate with others that you will have new matches with, because those are other people's matches, not yours. And they'll be able to be analyzed in the same type of way that like some of the tools like Rob Orthan's tools do, but with raw DNA instead of segment data. So yes, this is valuable. I know that a lot of people don't understand why or even what DNA reconstruction is. sometimes people think it's like the kit that shows up in your GEDmatch Genesis thing that matches everybody, and those are not reconstructed kits. You know, the ones that were the flawed, failed Genesis kits. Those are actually like kits from some Chinese companies that use a different template than us. I don't know there's anything wrong with those either. They're just a different system than we use. I mean, think about like metric versus, you know, inches versus centimeters or something. They're not compatible. But reconstructed kits get a bad rap for no reason, or for very little reason. I mean, you could make a lousy one, but Borland Genetics kits are generally not lousy ones. They're very good, high detailed and high resolution reconstructions. So basically, I think that my debut in London as a speaker will be my opportunity to really inform the public about the merits of DNA reconstruction, and just to educate the public in general. I mean, you don't have to agree with me, but just to make an informed decision and not base it on incomplete information. Try it. You might like it. But on a personal note, after a week of having been embedded among like-minded producers and consumers of genealogy technology, or in other words, being surrounded by others that share the same passions that I do, I could say that I'm ready to commit to doing this full-time rather than just nights and weekends. That's not going to happen tomorrow, because I do have to pay my bills, but I will be transitioning from lawyer to scientist throughout the year as my budget permits, and I'm going to try to do that without passing that down to the consumer, because I don't want to charge for my tools. I'm trying to think of some other out-of-the-box business models so that I can do this for a living at the same time where I'm providing a service to the community, as opposed to there's nothing wrong with charging people for what you've done, but I think with my particular tools that are kind of on the high-tech end of the spectrum, that are difficult to access to begin with, unless you've had some experience with visual phasing and things like that. I don't think it would be to my best interest or the community's best interest to be charging for my tools. Rather, perhaps to charge advertisements on my site or something like that in the background while the tools are running or something. I'll think of something, but yeah, I'm going to be transitioning from lawyer back to scientist, which is a full circle for me, because I was a physics major from MIT to begin with. So, so this science is really where my heart is, and I think I found my niche here. So, and I was impressed by the other people in the industry, and I'd like to be a part of that and bring genealogy technology to the public over the next few years or however long it takes. So I know this isn't your ordinary technical episode where I introduce the new technique or a tool, but thanks for sticking through. And in Borland Genetics land, the Creeper is live, by the way. It's not recommending workflows other than, you know, combining your own kits yet. I'm still training it. I haven't had any time, obviously, this week because I've been in Utah. But I will be training it to handle a lot of patterns to guide you through the DNA reconstruction process. It'll probably take over the next weeks and months before it gets to a point where you're going to use that instead of the standalone tools, as opposed to just using a standalone tool here and there when you got a special circumstance. But in the end, you will just be using the Creeper and not using the standalone tools unless we have a reason for doing so, because the Creeper is going to make better decisions about which templates to use, and because it's going to be at a position to analyze the data quickly, and not generically as far as, you know, combined templates are better. Well, that's not always true. It's going to examine the situation and decide which templates, you know, for example, to use, and which are better for whatever project you're doing or whatever project it thinks you're doing. So I have a ton of other ideas for new tools after having been through this convention, and I may work on some of those as well, but the main focus for the next few months is going to be on the Creeper. The guy I had doing Mac stuff for me is no longer, he's kind of disappeared, so I've asked him to help me a couple times, and I still need help. So, well, if you know how to code sign a Mac thing, if you were listening to this, let me know, and I will gladly have you do it instead. So see you in the next video or in the Facebook groups, and I'll be happy to field any questions not just about what I talked about, but about the convention in general. But just keeping in mind, I mean, there were probably 300 sessions, and I attended like, what, 10, 15 of them. So I may not know the answer to your question, but if I do, feel free to ask or about any questions about the convention and about upcoming conventions, because I plan on going to those as well. All right, until next week.